Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you're doing well from wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to this webinar, which I'll introduce shortly, but maybe as we wait for 1 more minute, as requested, we kindly introduce ourselves in the chat and probably say where you're joining us from and your organization. So yeah, just those three, where you're joining us from and your name and the organization you're representing. If you want to tell us more about what you're doing in your work, well and good, but we'll get to know about that later. But let me see who's here in the chat. Greetings to you, Kavita from Nairobi. Kavita is joining us from ICRISAT. Good to see you. Yeah. Let's see who else is here. ICRISAT India, yes. And my name is Nathan Rono. I am joining you from Nairobi. Hey, Edlin Muhebwa from Uganda. Greetings from Nairobi. Yeah, so let's see who's here in the chat, and we'll begin in a moment. All right, let me see who else is here. Emily from Summit, Nairobi. Hey, Afrin from India. Hello, Ivan from Mozambique. Hey, Peter. And I see Resa also. And I see you, Niati. How are you doing? Yeah, one more. Let me take one more. And Sidra. Hey, Sidra. How are you doing? It's good to see you. Did I mention Emily? Yes, I did. All right, let's get this going. This is the Gender Intentional Participatory Varietal Selection Training. And the aim of this training is to enhance community involvement in crop improvement. Our trainers for today will tell us more about this in the next hour or so. But let me quickly introduce our trainers for today. Remember, this is the English session. Today we have a French session tomorrow also covering the same. But for today, our trainers are Yila Jumai from International Rice Research Institute. Yila is a senior gender and social inclusion researcher with over 15 years experience in the field, and she will be one of our trainers today. And our other trainer today is Eileen Nchanji, who's also a gender specialist working with the Alliance of Biodiversity International, and CIAT. I hope I'm saying that right, Eileen. It's okay, you'll correct me when you come on. And she's also working with the PABRA program. PABRA is a Pan-African Bean Research Alliance. So Eileen also has worked over 32 countries in Central, Eastern, and Southern and Western Africa. And our trainers for today are both widely experienced in the field. And I am looking forward to hearing from this training and seeing what they have in store for us. So without further ado, allow me to welcome Yila Jumai and Eileen Chanj. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Nathan. So starting off the session, I'd pass it over to Yila. And then somewhere in the middle, we're going to take questions. And then we continue the second part of the session. Jimmy, over to you.
Okay, thank you. We are glad to have everyone that has joined in, and we hope to interact with you as we take on this training in understanding gender inclusion in participatory varietal selection. So I will start with the first few slides. Later on, I will pass it on to Eileen. Nathan, can you please lead us to show the presentation?
Yela, you're supposed to share that. You're sharing that from your screen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is this visible to everyone?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, good morning, afternoon, or should I say evening, depending on where you are joining us from. But we are glad to have you join this training, and we hope that we will be able to engage with you as we share the importance of gender intentional participatory varietal selection. The training will include this following outline for both the presentations I will make at the beginning and the ones Aileen will take us through. So we will be considering and briefly introducing the importance of gender in PVS and the importance of identifying and targeting the audience. We will also look at what constitutes an interdisciplinary team. And most importantly, we will introduce and discuss some selected methods of conducting PVS. Following that, we will also introduce ideas and methods for data analysis and decision making, and how to communicate PVS outcomes. And finally, we will briefly introduce post-PVS engagement. So basically, this is what training will cover. Right, so starting off, we will like to consider gender-responsive demand-led training, which is the outcome or part of what comes from PVS. Gender, as we all know it, is all about inclusivity to ensure that no harm is done in the process of conducting PVS or even integrating gender in demand-led breeding. We will not be able to achieve whatever effort breeders will put in their breeding decisions and design if farmers, who are the main end users of their breeding efforts, are not considered or included at the beginning. So farmers must be interested in planting the new variety, and consumers should also be able to buy those varieties. Otherwise, the effort put in doing that will be, wasted if the outcome are not, taken on board by those intended to have it. So at the end, we all know that farmers, processors, traders, and consumers are the main targets of our breeding outcome. And women make at least half of these end users. So it will be very important that we put them at the beginning and ensure that they are included and their input are part of what is being considered in the design. Why is gender important in varietal, participatory varietal selection? This is so because both men and women have different traits, and these differences as a result of gender division of labor, access to markets, and also the differences doesn't just come because of their gender, male or female, but also through the fact that at different age, people choose different things, and based on their ethnicity, education, social status, and all of these dichotomies, some of these differences inform their choice and the differences or similarities that we see when choices are made on trait preferences. So breeding program that overlook women's preferences as a major category of our breeding end users or consumers, then the product that is being developed may not be widely adopted. And this also will result to doing harm on these women and sometimes also increasing gender inequality as a result. So to ensure that gender is included in varietal selection in a very participatory way, breeding program need a way to do practical check of a product's profile. And some of the considerations include, one, having to think, does a trait involve gender-related preferences or inequalities that might hold back adoption? Does a trait include a benefit that can improve gender equity? So once these are considered, we should be able to ensure that the varietal selection is done in a participatory way. Gender analysis has shown that preferences reflect gender inequalities, which can be worsened in a way that might cause drudgery for women or increase the existing drudgery that women are faced with. Secondly, adoption of new varieties slows when consumer preferences are not met. So if we do not provide consumers with what they desire or what might meet their choices, it will mean that that variety or technology may not be adopted. Women often have different trait preferences from men, or sometimes these trait preferences may be similar. But we must be able to acknowledge that it is not always uniform, meaning the choices that men and women make are not uniform. So they vary in relation to different factors, including agronomic, physical characteristics across gender, and sometimes also within the socio-cultural context that inform decisions that men and women make. So this leads us to considering the need then for gender for inclusivity in general and the types of clients that we serve. We need to focus on all value chain actors, and value chain actors within the program include significantly farmers, with whom we always work with, but we must try to consider traders, consumers, processors, and institutions within this value chain. Traders and processors are key stakeholders, and therefore having meetings, demonstration, business platforms, or even trials must include all of them as key clients of our breeding output or products. In terms of participatory varietal selection, the constitution of the team is very important, and it is important because it will inform the kind of outcome we have when the selection is done. So these are the main or key multidisciplinary team that must be constituted. The first, of course, we know the breeders must be there, pathologists, gender scientists must be there, socioeconomic must be there, nutrition experts, seed system expert, all of that, constitute a good multidisciplinary team and can be drawn in such a way that every country should have a gender-focused person, either in the NARES, as we will always have, or even in the ministry, focus on agriculture and where some of the breeding decisions are being made. It is also important to have everyone in the team to not just be called upon at the 11th hour or when decisions are already made, but they must participate, actively participate, making sure that, you know, they are available at the time meetings are conducted and bring in their knowledge or expertise. There should be confirmation of clear roles and responsibility of each disciplinary team, and this should be able to support, you know, the design of any participatory varietal selection. How do we then map and, you know, identify this target audience? And this can be done by looking at who the actors are, their role, and the importance of having them, you know, within the team. First of all, as target audience, we need the farmers to be involved, and farmers are significant because they are the primary producers. We must make sure that also as part of their role that farmers attend trials and understand the varieties and adopt the new varieties that is being introduced. Farmers are important because they provide us feedback on the variety performance that they are cultivating and the preferences for the different traits that is introduced to them. And most times, you know, they make the decision based on what is, you know, on farm as they see it. The second actor group is the traders, and they are very important because in terms of their role, they serve as intermediaries between producers and the markets. So as a result, they serve as key stakeholders who provide insight from market demand and preferences for certain varieties over time, because they understand the markets very well. The third actor group is the processors. Processors transform new agricultural products as we know it into finished products that are consumed at the end. So they are very significant in ensuring that they are part of the varietal selection because they provide us with feedback on processing quality, the traits that are desired, and also when new varieties are introduced, they are also crucial in ensuring that there is consumer acceptance because they link us to the consumers from the products they produce out of the raw materials provided them. Other actors include the consumers, and consumers, of course, we know have a very wide, broad spectrum. So end users of our agricultural products, both food and processed products, are the consumers, and they are very important because their preferences influence the kind of demand that we have for different crop traits, whether it is flavor, you know, nutritional content, or whatever kind of traits that the consumers prefer are the ones that they buy, and hence, you know, they drive adoption in that sense. Consumers also help in shaping the market-oriented development of new varieties. These new varieties must be aligned to consumers' taste.
From all corners of the world are coming together, not just for this, but throughout the year, not in Rome, New York.
Is this somebody from the background?
This year, we have a witness, character, engagement.
Nathan, can you
Youth leaders and all
please automatically off the mic of all the attendees?
Yes, I'm trying to mute Racha. It's Racha.
Okay.
Pacha, please mute.
Jumia, you can
continue.
continue.
And community
Jumia, you're muted.
Okay. I'm back now, I guess. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have seen producers, farmers, consumers, traders, processors, and all as part of the actor group that must constitute our target audience. We specifically want to also make sure that women and youth who are part of the different value chain actors that we have highlighted already are also targeted in the selection process. Often, the primary caregivers and food preparers at home are women. So they fit in neatly in this role because they are the ones that are involved in small-scale agricultural production. They are also involved in marketing. As traders, they are also involved in processing the raw materials into finished products and in decision-making at the household level. So women are uniquely placed to provide unique insights into crop characteristics and important for home consumption, processing, and marketability. So all of these traits, seems to place women at a very significant position to provide us input based on their role and the experience they have. They also ensure that varieties meets household nutrition and income needs. So they deserve, to be well included and their views sought for once we are in this process. The next is the youth, who also cut across all the actor segments, being the next generation of our value chain actors, and even the current, they are already being involved. Often youths are open to adopting innovative practices and technologies. So it is very important that we involve them and key to long-term sustainability of agricultural innovations by inviting and including the feedback or the perspectives of the youth and see the kind of fresh perspective they will offer and contribute to integrating modern technologies into farming systems. So hence the significance of having women and youth included as we target the key audience. Now we will move on to then the method. Having understood the significance of the participatory varietal selection, who the target clients and audience are, how do we conduct PVS? What are the methods? These are some of the methods that are in use, which include the trichots, mother-baby trials, genomic selection, the G+ products profile that many of us in the agenda platform are aware of or have been using, revamp methods for data collection, and the CAD method. All these are part of, data collection methods that we have been using and should be included, or we will be talking about right now, and see how that keys into PVS. The first is the tricot method. So in tricot method, crowdsourcing approach that combines elements of participatory research, distribute 3 varieties as a kit to each participating farmer. And key features of this include the hands-off approach, where farmers evaluate at least 3 varieties without extensive supervision, allowing for broader participation and data collection across the different ecologies or environments. The second feature is the fact that it ensures feedback mechanism. So here we are able to have farmers feedback throughout the crop cycle, and making sure that by doing so, it enhances the data reliability, and we obtain as detailed possible as we can. The third feature is the fact that it is a blind trial, and varieties are coded to reduce bias, with farmers not knowing the identity of the varieties until after evaluation. And this is very important because it helps to ensure objective feedback being received and analyzed at the end. And finally, aside the key features, we could be also tricot method could also be used after varietal release to expose farmers to several varietal options and to obtain data from a wide range of ecologies on preferred varieties that are being cultivated or promoted. So in terms of operational steps for tricots, these are the key ways that the tricot method is being operationalized. First, varieties are randomly assigned to farmers based on statistical trial design. And this is so that we are able to prevent biases and enhance data integrity, like I said earlier. So you can see, farmers, varieties, data collection, and making sure that farmers are able to observe and evaluate the varieties during the crop cycle. And the next step is to ensure that farmers rank the varieties themselves for the different performance aspects. And this process, supports independent farmers management and to reduce also logistical burden as it is being organized in a group meeting, and it also occurs before and after the cropping cycle. So all of these are very significant steps that are followed in the tricots method. And finally, I will like us to consider these steps very carefully as put here in a very schematic way. The steps include, first of all, the preparation stage. And in the preparation stage, we have 2 key ways of doing that. First of all, prepare the project to ensure availability of the technologies. And the second part of the preparatory stage is the design. And the design ensures that the project use climb up to set of the project details. So all the details are included. And then after the preparation is the implementation stage. And this also has 2 significant steps. The first one here include recruiting the participants through through different ways, either through fairs or workshop or even in meetings. The second aspect of the implementation stage is the preparation test. And this test the packages and the distribution trial packages, mainly at workshops or in meetings. The third tricot key step is the execution. After preparation, implementation is the execution. And here we have 3 major ways of doing that. The first is the start on trial, the on-farm trial, that is cultivate, technology options. The second is participants' record, in a way that we are able to make sure participant record observation is written down and also observations are taken. The other one is the field agent data collection, where they gather information on cards or through calls. And then the analysis, communication, and the iteration from that aspect by repeating the process to illustrate or refine and expand the data. So these are key processes that we go through to ensure that the TRICOT method is implemented or designed properly and accordingly. So I'm going to pass on this to Eileen, who will take us through the rest of the slide. Eileen, welcome on board.
Okay, thanks very much, Jumia. Maybe we just ask questions, so we have like a little break there before we continue. So there's a question from Halau. I hope I pronounced your name well. And after that, others could put questions in the chat, or you could, put up your hand and then unmute and ask the question. So the first question I see on the chat, Jumia, is what is the, let me just go there so ask it exactly. What is the main responsibility of seed systems in PVS?
Okay, I think that the main response is, first of all, seed systems are it's very, very significant in PVS, because that is where the beginning of the material for any kind of breeding or profile development start from. So the seed system ensures that the understanding of the seeds and its traits are also inclusive in such a way that all the key stakeholders and target audience, as we have earlier described, are part of the seed system. And if they understand the seeds and the importance of the different seed varieties, they are able to make better, selection during the varietal selection. So I don't see also a gap. It should be a kind of continuous effort from seed selection to the participatory varietal selection. So once these are done together, it provides farmers the platform to have a good understanding of the kind of seed, the varieties, and the traits that are being introduced, and have their input on that at different stages, whether beginning from seed selection to varietal selection and all of that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks very much, Jumai. Halul, I hope that answered your question. If that's not clear, please, like I said, indicate with the hands up, and then we can permit you to ask more questions. I'm not seeing any other question in the chat. Yes, so there's a question from Emily. Emily says, thank you very much for the presentation. So in implementing of TRICOT, participants are recruited through fairs or workshop. Can this lead to a bias selection? So maybe I take the TRICOT question. So often, I mean, TRICOT says you can take that from fairs and you can take that from workshops, but often what happens is we don't pick participants from fairs. The idea of bringing in fairs is that sometimes when you pass only through the national agricultural partners, or sometimes when you pass only through the community facilitators, they pick particular people. So they get certain rural farmers that all the time are involved in that activity. But because you want to reach more people, because you want to have sort of like an intersectional element where you're bringing people who have experience, people who don't have experience, people who, you know, have relations, but those who don't, those who are poor. So then opening it up sometimes and going to agricultural fairs, especially in communities or countries like Tanzania, where it's literally where all farmers come to look at, you know, what are the different varieties across multiple crops. It's easy then to get a sample that is a little bit more rigorous. So that's the reason. Another reason why sometimes we pull from workshops is also from the workshops. If you're having a discussion on how tricot works and who should be involved, you will generally have representatives of NGOs, so they can provide you with their list of farmers. You have representatives from the National Agricultural System. If it's Kenya, it's CARO, for example, they have a list. You also have international NGOs there who are invited, and they can tell you that's the list. And then combining all of this, you can actually make sure then that, you know, you're not selecting as a result of those who are coming, but with that representative list, you can be able to reselect to get the number of farmers that you're working with. So the whole idea of not just going to one person like an NGO working there and getting a list, but getting it from multiple people through different means just gives you more variety of the farmers that you're going to work with. So that way, when you have a variety at the end of the day, it's meeting the needs of all the actors, as Jumia was explaining. So that's sort of like how we do it. But of course, I would go and say it's country specific. So if your country, for example, doesn't have like agricultural shows, because that's what they're referring to here as fairs, and then you would have to find other ways to be able to get these farmers that you want to work with. Another question, during data collection, do you use the tools for ranking, like priority or preference ranking? So I think we'd be talking about the tools and how they're being used. But yes, so tricot, from what Jumia just presented on the 13th slide, they actually have what they call CleanUp. So CleanUp has also regression analysis, the Bradley-Terry model that does the ranking of the data. So you collect all the information, is digitally collected, it gets into CleanUp, and then you can use these different models to be able to analyze the data. So I think, Amati, we understand, we realize that, yeah, your mic was on, but you didn't realize it. It's fine. I think we pulled through, and yeah, we've got in here. So if there are any other questions, please do put them in the chat. But just to make sure that, you know, we had said that an hour, 30 minutes, and we would not want to go above that, because we know also you're very busy. I would continue with the presentation, and then, of course, Jumia and I would respond to your questions at the end of the session. So I'm not seeing any questions right now. I think there's one from Bella.
No, it's not a question. It's just that the Bradley-Terry, that the Bradley-Terry is no longer used, but it's a placket-loose analysis in which you not only get looking at the best and the worst, but it's a more nuanced model that gives more accurate results. But that's just a technical thing.
Okay, so thank you very much for that, Bella. So I think actually they're having a tricot meeting. So any updates, we're going to get that from Bella and be able to share. So just to continue, because I see people asking if we're done. No, we're going more into other methods that you can use to collect participatory varietal selection in the field. So Jumia, please, next slide. Jumia, please, can you move to the next slide? Yeah, and if you can please put it in presentation mode. Thank you very much. So now we're moving to our genomic selection. So the genomic selection is just slightly different from the tricot approach. And what is that difference? So for genomic selection, we do not put the data on ClimeUp, but it's also possible to put this data on ClimeUp. For genomic selection, also the focus is on breeding lines and not necessarily on varieties. So Tricot uses both. It can do breeding lines as well as varieties, but genomic selection is actually just breeding lines. And the idea is not bringing farmers when you already have a variety where you want to socialize them or create awareness, but get farmers from the beginning to be able to push which breeding lines would be released at the end of the day. So it relates also to the seed question. When you pull which breeding lines make sense, so literally farmers are therefore then selecting which seed is going to be released in the market of which they would be able to grow. And as Juma presented here, we're not only looking at farmers, but also a possibility of bringing in traders and possibility of bringing in processors as well. But starting in the farmers' fields, the farmers also get 3 breeding lines. The breeding lines, of course, are coded, and that's because if farmers have an idea of what the possible variety might be, they might be biased of, what they have grown before. The idea is moving breeding from just on station to farmers' fields. So you understand how those varieties perform in farmers' fields, and then if the variety at the end of the day is released, when farmers take it back to their fields, they be able to grow it and be able to get that high adoption and productivity. In getting the farmers that would be involved in this, we look at different socioeconomic conditions. So we want farmers that are poor, on the side farmers that are rich, but we also want farmers that have experience in growing the crop for a long time, as well as farmers that don't as well. And also we look at other elements of disability. So often the intersectional elements that we combine is in relation to the number of farmers we're working with. So if you're working with 200 farmers, you don't want to have a lot of intersectional elements, because when you're doing your regression analysis, you might not be able to get very good data to see exactly what's happening. So what we try to do is reach out to about 500-600 farmers so that we have more intersectional elements we are considering. We are able to analyze it and have the data. Also, another thing we're trying to do is, increase the recycling of parents. We know breeding usually takes 5-6 years. So through this process, also the idea is reducing it to 2 years, or if possible, 1.5 years. And of course, make sure that we're not just increasing genetic gain on station, but on farmers' fields. Next slide, please. So for the genomic selection, what we do is we get men managed plots, female managed plots, jointly managed plots, because we understand that when it comes to farm management, often sometimes it might be only a woman or man, or it could be joined, to understand if we get the variety that farmers are saying this is what we should go for. Should there be particular varieties for particular plot managers, or can these varieties actually work across all these plots? And also it gives us an idea of who should we be talking to if a variety has to be introduced to farmers, who is actually managing those plots, and not just maybe making decision at the end on how the income, for example, from the crop is redistributed. So like I already mentioned, we look at issues of sex, issues of world class, in the case in Tanzania. Also, for beans, we had 3 varieties, breeding lines we were giving out, but this was according to colors. So the yellow bean, the red mustard, and the red variety. And of course, like I said, it's coded. So there's no idea of creating bias on the side of the farmers. And it's always good to have a good geographical scope. So you're looking at geography. So like in Tanzania, where we did this genomic selection, and other crops have also done that. We did that in all the different, regions across the country, because you want something at the end of the day that is representative. And we just have a link there. So we have a link of the first time we carried this out, the report we have. We've done a second round, which of course we are now analyzing data. So that would be shared later. But that's just a link to give you some of the results that we saw. Next slide. And so these are just sort of like pictorials explaining how this data was collected. So as I said, there was the on-station data collection, but then there was the on-farm data collection. making sure, of course, that the data is disaggregated by gender. But like I said, in this case, we were specific. We looked at sex, we looked at world class, but also we looked at plot management, men manage, women manage, jointly manage. You would see that the plots are very small, and we encourage farmers to actually do this in the middle of their farms. And then after this data has been collected, so we collect socioeconomic data, including gender data, but also you have data on yield, data on sort of like the crop growth and size, everything which is collected when we started by the farmer. Realized it was a lot of drudgery on the farmer because the farmer has a lot to do. So collecting this data makes it too much for them. And so then what we did next was we got students who have finished their university degrees, are in the community, do not have jobs, to actually collect this data. So it lessens the work on the farmer. The farmer is able to focus on the management of the plot. Of course, we also collected socioeconomic data similar to what you have for Tricot, but additionally, we had questions relating to the market because we're looking at a gender-responsive participatory varietal selection program, but also that is demand-driven. So something that if farmers grow, the market would also be able to absorb it. Thus, increasing demand for it is increasing production, income, food security, and the rest as we know. Next slide. So these are some of the results. So here we started by collecting data, like I said, from the 3 regions in Tanzania. So we collected data from Mbeya, from the Lake Zone, and from the Arusha area. We collected data from about 131 farmers. But here, actually, the idea is just giving you sort of like information on if you use the genomic selection approach to collect data, especially when you're doing, because in this case, you're actually collecting data on varietal selection, what type of results can you get? So then you see how important it is to use that tool or another tool. So of course, the first one you see in front of you, it's the traits that farmers actually are interested in, which we know in most crops starts with yield. But the interesting thing was this was really very important, especially for the jointly managed plots compared to the other plots. And then, of course, the market demand also was very important because, of course, every farmer grows a crop for a certain reason. So the trait is what they're looking for, which could be yield, which could actually be the market. So they're sure they can sell it. Early maturity also was important. And this was important, especially for the male managed plot and the jointly managed plot compared to the female managed plots, for example. And just to have at the back of your mind, like this data is for beans. So which means if you actually collect this type of information on rice, on cassava, it could be similar, but also could be very different. And the country context also matters. And then another important thing, of course, was other traits like disease resistance as climate is changing, drought and pest resistance, you know, the price premiums are also important. But then you would see yield market and early maturity. And early maturity in this case was really what was important. But also, remember, if you look at what we have, we are showing what's happening with male, female, and joint. So you see the first 3, they both are interested in that. But you would see that while, for example, the jointly managed was really interested in the yield and the market demand, you would notice that for the male managed, it was early maturity and yield. And if you look at the female managed, it was more the yield and the market and not so much the early maturity. So there are those disparities that are often there and important for you to note because that helps you when you now start doing interventions on what gets released and what comes back to the farmers for them to be able to adapt or adopt. Sorry. Next slide. So also some of the information we collected was just seeing how many times seed is being recycled, who is using certified seed, who is using quality declared seed. In Tanzania, quality declared seed is permitted, but it happens only in the district. So certified quality declared seed in a district cannot be sold, for example, to another district. just so you have that idea. So of course, what we realized was we also collected additional information. So another thing is when you're collecting PVS, few information, but you could collect a lot more if you realize that you need other type of information. So we also had farmers who had varieties that were released. So we sort of like compared these breeding lines, which in this case we call newly released, with older varieties. And then you would realize that females recycle, for example, more than the male or the jointly managed plots. And if you look even at the land, for example, on the beans and yield, you're going to see that there are disparities across whether it's female, male, or jointly managed. Next slide. So yeah, we really put in our gender angle because we wanted to know the implication of the threats on workload, on input requirement, but as well as control over income. And what we saw was that high yielding beans can result in increase in workload and additional inputs because you have to use a certain quantity of fertilizer, a certain quality of seed. So certified seed will do well definitely compared to QDS or compared to the seed that you just buy in the market or buy, for example, from a neighbor. When it came to control over income, there were no effects on that. While the market demand threats did not affect the workload or the inputs, but according to most farmers, they said, we saw increase in our incomes when actually we use these varieties that had a market demand. And also for those who went for varieties that were early maturing, it significantly cut down on the workload because then you're spending, let's say, for example, 2 months before the variety gets to maturity. So you spend less compared to if you had to spend 3 months. So that's more inputs and more, additional workload on it before it gets to maturity. So looking at these elements also then become important because they determine why maybe a female farmer would go for, early maturing variety or variety that has early maturing traits compared to one that has higher yields because they're also looking of the workload involved in addition to their community and productive roles as well. And this also goes for men because men might not have a lot of reproductive roles, but they also have community roles that they are also involved in. Next slide. So I think I can actually skip this, but this is sort of like just using the standard Poisson regression model to determine farmers' performance in relation to, of course, the seeds per pot in the breeding line. So, of course, performance was higher among men-managed plots compared to female-managed plots. So it gives you that type of information. For those women, especially where, farming is their main occupation, they dedicated more time to the experimental plots compared to men, which was also something we were interested in because we wanted to even understand if the male managed plots were managed by women or were actually managed by men. So we collected more of that type of data in this phase, which is something that we'll be presenting later. Of course, group membership is also an important variable for increasing the performance on the farm. So I think issues of collective agency, we see it's still really very, very relevant as well. Next slide. So then, of course, you also have the mother-baby demo. So the mother-baby demo trials often are used by breeders and agronomists when they are actually testing different varieties or sometimes breeding lines, and often farmers are involved in this. So in most cases, the mother-baby demos are managed by researchers, are managed by the technical team. It's set up like in a randomized complete block design where they want to look at the genetic gains on the farm, but also the idea is doing multiple replications because breeders will tell you if you collect the data once, it cannot tell you much. But if you collect it over a period of time, maybe 3 or 4 times, then they would say that data collected is stable, and then you can make a decision on that. So the mother demos are often when they take farmers and train them on the different existing technologies. So these are new varieties or these are new breeding lines. select according to the traits or what you see or what you consider might work on the farm. While where you have the baby trials is when farmers are encouraged to take those technologies from the mother demos and try it in their own farms and be able to see what's happening. So even though the mother demos are often not on station, but they are on a farm that is controlled. So they're making sure there's the right fertilizer, there's the right, sort of like cropping mechanism they're using and everything. While on the baby demo, it's the farmer that determines what goes into the farm, depending on their socioeconomic capacities and also their realities at any point in time. So often data is collected in the mother demos as well as in the baby demos, and the focus for participatory varietal selection is often the yield. Sorry, not often the yield, it's often the traits. So what are farmers interested in? Is it the way the crop stands? Is it the yield that they're seeing, which in this case, they're probably counting the pods? Is it that the leaves are, having some certain color? So maybe issues of disease, pest and disease coming up. They are also looking, for example, at even the roots of it, that determines sort of like what the soil sometimes looks like. So all that type of data is what is often collected. And then in most cases, if there is an organoleptic test after, farmers can now talk about the palatability, can now talk about issues of nutrition, can now talk about issues of texture, but also sometimes for farmers, what is important is the color of the variety, looking at what the market is asking for, and in some cases, even the size. So all this type of data is collected across for men, for women, different value chain actors, and often analyzing this type of data is ranking. So what are the best varieties as per what traits? What are the worst varieties as per what traits? Ranking that. And then a short key informant interview just to understand why farmers are saying one is better over the other. Next slide, please. Then, of course, here it's just giving a little bit more information on sort of like the key features of the mother-baby trials and what are the benefits, so which I've already explained, but I could just go through very fast. Of course, it allows for the assessment of varietal performance across different microclimates, because often these mother-baby trials are not just in one geographical area, multiple geographical areas. So you're able to see how they perform in varied conditions. Farmers are actively involved, but like I said, not only farmers, we're actually bringing in traders, bringing in processors, and also building on the local knowledge that these actors have. So it's a mix of science and traditional knowledge coupling together and really participatory, so not really top-bottom. Of course, you're understanding the preferences of men, of women, but also of youth, because we're having young people now engaged in agriculture, not as much as men and women, but they're there. So we're also considering their preferences. Of course, a lot of it is the ranking method, evaluating the large number of genotypes. So usually when you start from like 1 to 2 to 3, you actually have like thousands of genotypes that you are working on, where usually then breeders do not bring farmers. But when it reduces to 50, then that's when farmers come, because then it's easy to be able to manage. And of course, the feedback, especially from the baby trials, is important because it provides, that ground level perspective. You understand what farmers themselves are going through, because often farmers are not able to meet sometimes all the, all the ideas we put together on how farms should be managed. It's more their realities of what is feasible or not. Next slide. So yeah, I talk about two methods, the ribbon method, and then on the next slide, I talk about the card method. So the ribbon method literally is a method used with farmers, traders or processors for them to be able to indicate which varieties they prefer and the traits that sort of like push them towards that variety. So two ways to do the ribbon method. You have ribbons of multiple colors. So it could be 2, could be 3 colors, depending on how you want to collect this data. You could actually give the ribbon to individual farmers, or you group the farmers in men and women. If you want to do it individually, you could actually give, so if I start from groups, so you have two groups, one group is men, one group is women, and then you give the men, let's say, for example, blue, you give the women pink, and the men would pick all the varieties that they think are the best, discussing as a group. Now, of course, the bias in this is if one person is more open or speaks on behalf of others, then you might not get the variety or the traits that relate to the whole group, but just this person who has control. So if you get like a chief and everyone else is there, then they probably listen to the chief, even though they don't agree, they would be like, yeah, this is what the chief said, and then you put it. So what we try to do is we often discourage doing it in groups, except maybe the breeding program says we don't have enough money, we don't have enough personnel. So then that is done but indicated so that we are conscious of that bias. We prefer if actually it is done individually. And if it's done individually, then you give each farmer, for example, 3 color traits. So if you're looking for the best variety, the average variety, and the worst variety, and then you give them colors in relation to that. So if it's red, is the best. If it's blue, for example, is average. If it's green, is the best. And then farmers are not supposed to talk to each other, but they go in and they tie it as they're moving. But then we are going to have a qualitative session later, like an FDG, where farmers now would explain why they put each trait on each variety. And this would be after a gender scientist or socioeconomic scientist in the field would go and pull all the information that farmers have put on a piece of paper. And so is able to say the red were on variety A, B, C, D. And then now they're explaining why. So literally the pictures you see there, it's like when the farmers get in, they go through the field, have a look. Then the breeder explains, you know, the model of the farms. And then now they get the ribbons. And now they're moving in and putting in those ribbons. In the picture below, what we even did to make it easy, because we also want farmers to spend less time on the field and not spend hours, is we also got students. When the farmers are putting this, they're explaining to the students and notes are already being taken. So after that, we just have a short discussion and farmers can go home and be able to do other activities. Next slide, please. So yeah, I just want to touch a little bit, and I see the questions, I would get to that. How we were able to measure, how we came up with this idea, even in the PVS, of talking about issues on drudgery, talking about issues on income generation, talking about issues on inputs. So there's what they call the gender plus product profile and gender plus consumer profile tool. So in this case, the ideas of drudgery, inputs, and income came from the gender plus product profile tool. And the idea was when product profiles were developed, the focus was only on the geography. Focus was only on, is it, you know, the farmers coming, are they male, female? We just had a box to tick. What were the traits that farmers are going for? Because the box for gender was ticked, so it wasn't really important collecting for men and women. And so Bella was actually also part of this group, the gender and breeding team, where we developed the G+ tools. And the idea was integrating other elements we can measure beyond sex. So beyond looking at whether the person you're talking to is a man or a woman, what about looking at issues to do with drudgery? If the inputs that are needed are very high, what happens? So what are the negative benefits? What are the positive benefits? But also what could possibly be the negative issues that could do harm? If the bean variety, for example, is one where you grow it, but after that it shatters and you have to spend time to pick it, you know, that's increasing the workload. Do we have cases like that? And what would the farmers prefer? If the money sold in the market is very high, would they go for workload and say, you know what, we don't care if we do that as long as we make a lot of money? Or would they say, no, we want another variety? So literally this information was collected, and it's more like a simple calculation. How many times do farmers say that increasing the workload is a problem for them compared to inputs? And literally, like I would say, it's a simple addition. So more farmers are saying is increasing their workload. And then we have the qualitative side where we want to understand what does that mean if they're saying their workload is being increased. and what are the levels are we looking at? So that was the important thing. Next slide. So the next slide is just on the very left-hand corner showing you the gender plus tool. So if you're wanting to add market questions, you can actually look at issues to do with product mapping. So if you're looking at beans, what products comes out of beans, which consumers do they have, developing an evidence table on what are your different consumers interested in, what can you be able to provide to them, what are their preferences, are they looking more at food security, are they interested in gender equity, are they looking at, you know, a new market that is coming out there. If you're looking at the product profiling, which is where the questions we integrated into the PVS, we're looking at, you know, what are the gender trade preferences, what are the positive benefits, but also what might be some of those negative issues like increasing drudgery, for example, increasing inputs. So all those are considered. And why did we think of integrating this into the participatory varietal selection tool? It's because we need the right products for the right customers. And to be able to do that, you need to have the right questions. There are questions sometimes you ask and then you don't see the value of it. You cannot even analyze it. It's not helping you. For example, provide information to the breeder to integrate that information in the breeding priorities. So right products, right questions to the right people to be able to get the right products. And also you need to know these traits we're looking at. What are the impacts? Sometimes they're positive, but sometimes they're not. So if they are negative, that information needs to get to the breeder. If they're positive as well, it needs to get to the breeder. So it actually guides and improves on the breeding priorities in the country. Next slide. Yeah, so here you have the CAT method. So the CAT method is not so different from the ribbon method, but the CAT method you see on the right, they're colors. So it's like more preferred, second preferred, third preferred. It's the same idea of giving different farmers to be able to provide data on the traits they prefer as well as the variety. But the advantage of the CAT method is on the CAT method already you can put like socioeconomic data of the farmer, of the trader, of the processor. And so when they're actually now picking which traits they want to go for, which varieties they prefer, you're able to combine that data. For the ribbon method, because you have a ribbon, so ribbon is just a trait, you cannot do that. So often what I have done is with the ribbon method, like I said, have students who would have a questionnaire with this socioeconomic data. And then you have these additional questions where when the farmer is putting the ribbon, you're actually filling in that information. So you would realize that takes a little bit more time. It's a little bit more expensive. So the question you have to ask yourself is what budget do you have? What time do you have? What personnel do you have to be able to pick which method you want to use to collect this data? But what I would say is never say, oh, this is very expensive, qualitative data. No, it takes a little bit more time, but actually, if you don't understand the why of why people are going for something, it becomes problematic because you might think they're saying A, but if you don't understand what A means, you send it to a breeder puts A, and then you realize what's happening. There's still no increase in adoption. So a farmer might say, for me, it's palatability. But when you find out what does palatability mean? For some people, it's the taste. For some people, actually, it's the fact that beans gives gas. I don't want beans that gives gas, but the person says palatability. So also dismantling those and understanding what exactly the farmer refers with by that is able to enrich what the breeder puts in the system. So like I said, CAT method, of course, is still ranking, best to worst, the different traits that are there. But what is really important is that discussion after that gives a deeper understanding of the traits that the participants value and why they do value that. Next slide, please. So of course, we have the 4-colored ranking. So this just gives you a little bit the process that I've already explained. So white could be, most preferred by men. yellow most preferred by women, blue least preferred by men. So literally we use colors that men and women associate with. So some gender experts might say, you know, it's men why you put in blue, when actually we're trying to get people to understand that, you know, gender is constructed. That's the idea. So when you bring men and you give them a color that they don't associate, and I don't know if many people know, but men are a little bit colorblind. Then it gets difficult even for them when they are picking the variety to put the right colors. So often what we do is multiple colors we give to women, but with men, we try to stick to certain type of colors, white, blue, green, you know, yeah, because also, I mean, we're looking at the not just the gender stereotypes, but we're looking at also in relating to men and women coming to color what works best for who. Also, it allows for nuances in insights on gender-specific preferences. And also, you're able to match these preferences with the socioeconomic data, which looks at the age, sex, looks at the land size, looks at where they buy, who makes decisions, and it gives you a more detailed information on why certain participants are going for certain varieties. So it might not just be they're going because they think it's the best, but they're looking at the economic conditions, or sometimes they're looking at their land size as well. Next slide. So, of course, different ways in which you can analyze this data. Descriptive statistics, where you're looking at, like I said, the stakeholders, you know, socioeconomic data in relation to their choice of varieties. Could also be more of a parametric or non-parametric test to determine the differences, you know, between men and women, sex, looking at issues to do with plot management as well. You can also do regression analysis, where it gives you a deeper understanding on the impacts of the preferences, controlling, of course, for socioeconomic factors. You can also do a principal component analysis. Of course, with this, you are able to reduce the data dimensionality, and then you highlight the traits even from organoleptic evaluations. If you actually have questions on that, you know, integrated into your questionnaire. But at the end of the day, it would help you get very good information on the promising varieties, of course, that moves to the next evaluation phase, because the participatory varietal selection often is before varieties are released, or sometimes it's when varieties are released, but they want farmers to sort of like reevaluate it to pick the best, so that that is what is being pushed into the communities, into the market, for farmers and other value chain actors to be able to access and use. Next slide. Important in communicating the results. So that's the reason why up there, I give some of the results that we are getting. Of course, there are multiple results, but it's important that you're able to come up with like a report, a paper, a brochure, a brief, an infographic, you know, so that you're able to summarize these reports in a way that your different actors are able to understand it, assimilate it, help guide the different activities they're involved in. It could be in workshops, could be in meetings, could be even just, you know, like a community community workshop, but also could be like a community meetings, where you even share it with those in the communities, and they're the ones sharing the information with farmers, researchers, other stakeholders. Also a discussion even with the breeders on how to integrate this, a discussion even with those promoting the seed, you know, on which varieties farmers are actually interested in. You could put this on social media, it could be peer-reviewed journals, could be WhatsApp groups, where a lot of our farmers are nowadays, could be like in Kenya, that call it bonanza, where, you know, the chief would call the community meeting, and then you sit and explain to them. And so you also get their feedback, because then it's important before you do the second activity, as you look at how robust that is, you're getting feedback from all those who are part of the implementation, the farmers, the processors, integrated, so that the design becomes better and more participatory. Also, of course, this evidence is something you want to get also to the policymakers, whether there's going to be a change in policy, or just saying policy is already there, but implementation is an issue. What can we actually do about that? So communicating the results is important. It also shows even the value of gender. Why did you collect information for men and women, from different plot managers and all that. Next slide. And when you do the participatory varietal selection, it doesn't end there. But after that, what next? It's very important. So following up, like I said, with stakeholders to monitor the adoption rates, performance of the release varieties in the communities already, or feedback to get back to breeders as they're moving the breeding lines to the next stage, what they should actually consider, making sure that these PVS trials are ongoing and under changing conditions. So you don't focus only on one region. And then when you take to the other region, nothing is happening because there were no trials there. So you could not even assess whether those breeding lines or those varieties work for that area. Also making sure that even the questions you have are not just yes or no. You want to have open-ended questions where people can explain. Like I said, you even want to have, excuse me, short meetings after to understand the why of choices that were made. So you really want a more mixed method, quantitative, qualitative. You want to combine these insights from, the farmers to also even what you're seeing on station, on farm becomes really important and gives a better information, one which is more nuanced, but also more detailed. And then, of course, you also want to address some of the post-harvest threats. Often when we're doing the participatory varietal selection, it's before harvesting. So even after you harvest, what do you see? For beans, you have to beat it up. What happens when you take to dry it on? So all of that information, how to make sure that they can also be collected and sent back to breeders, because we also know when it comes to post-harvest, there's a lot of loss and waste happening at that sector as well. Next slide. So yes, just why PVS is important. So I can rush over these. Of course, the first thing we want to do is gender inclusion. Like Jumi, I said, inclusivity is important. We want everyone on board. We want, farmers to benefit, but we want to make sure there's the right product profile, that there's immediate feedback that breeders can incorporate. We're not only looking at breeders, we're looking at gender experts, pathology. So like there really has to be an interdisciplinary team. We want, to speed up the breeding process as well. We want to make sure that we're looking at the demand of the products. We're not just producing something and then struggling to force people like, hey, grow these and see what happens. We want to closely align what is being developed with what our different actors want. Give them the varieties they're asking for, so preferred varieties that are suitable for the different geographical areas and not what we think, but we also really want to consider all these intersectional elements of the farmers. So we're looking at not just sex, we're looking at issues to do with wealth, we're looking at issues to do with experience, and we're looking also at issues to even do with assets and what they can be able to afford. Next slide. Here are some references. Next slide. So thank you very much. I think the very last slide would be just acknowledgement of the different partners and actors that we worked with. What we've also done is we would share with everyone on the team. So one, we have a short feedback session. It's, I think, like 10 questions. We would love you to fill it to assess the course. But that as well would help us with your email addresses to be able to share with you some sample PVS tools that we developed. We have very short ones because most breeders were asking for like a 2 or 3 pager. But if you're interested, we could also share other tools that are a little bit longer, like the genomic selection tools that I have used. And also, please, you would have Jumia available, myself, Evelyn. Evelyn has been quiet today because tomorrow she'd be doing the French session, but we're available to provide you with any information you need, any tools that you need, also take you through, because we know today was a little bit short period of time for your different themes. We can actually do that as well. So thank you very much. I think we can address some of the questions and then we can probably close the session. So
yes, Eileen, you have a number of questions.
Yes.
Let me see which was the last one. So I think the most recent one was how workloads measured by Bella. Yeah, so that's the first one.
So Bella, for the workloads, we did the regression analysis. So literally it was just more on how many people said, for them workload was an issue, and then understanding the reason they were giving for that increase in workload. So it's just basic economic analysis we did there. And this year, what we're doing a little bit differently is when we collected this data last year, we were not able to do a qualitative analysis. So we just had like informal discussions with some of the farmers. So I visited like some of the male managed, female managed, and jointly managed plots. But this year, what we did differently was we actually had focus group discussions with 2 female managed plots, 2 male managed plots, and 2 jointly managed plots in all of the communities. And we wanted to understand a little bit more these issues to do with workloads, these issues to do with inputs, as well as income. So we're still analyzing that data. Thank you.
Yeah. Can
Okay,
I?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I just want to add about what Ellen is just saying. Sometimes there is a question related to about joint managed plot. Sometimes couples disagree on the preferred threat ranking. I think this can be linked to the workload that you just mentioned. On the farm, depending either it's cereal or leguminous or cowpea or beans, depending on this type of farm, the workloads of each individual in the family there is no equal workload. Probably women might be doing the sowing or they might be removing the weed. So sometimes based on this, one can appreciate the preferred crop different to the other. If you are the one who is weeding or who is harvesting, and the harvest time is the time where you have quite a lot of things to do, so you prefer the short time variety. So it can happen that in a couple, you see the couple are both managing the farm, but they're appreciating the variety differently because they are not equally involved in terms of workload, management in this specific farm. So the two can affect each other, or sometimes also the intention behind why they are growing the crop also can affect. The woman can bring on board what is her intention about growing this specific crop. If she got her also individual plot where she's growing probably the same crop in her small plot, and also working on the couple managed farm. So this can affect sometimes the appreciation of a specific crop. So we are facing this, in everyday basis. So then it will now depend on the market segment. So sometimes you have to take into account these different views so that in the end of the day, you can have quite a PVS that stands and that could make a kind of impact. I just wanted to comment on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Evelyn.
All right,
Thank you.
Eileen, I see you have 4 minutes to respond to a number of questions. So I don't know how you want to take this.
I'd be fast. Let's just.
Okay, for jointly managed plots, sometimes couples disagree on the preferred traits. I think you probably have mentioned this. Did you encounter this?
Yeah, we did. Yes. So we had cases where it was male managed plot, but because it was beans, when you ask the guy how he's managed, he says, ask my wife. I'm taking care of the maize. I'm taking care of the rice. So we had those issues, and we have also those questions answered. Like I said, where it could be men managed, but the woman is the one doing it, jointly managed, but the woman is doing it, but the man is making decisions on the income.
Okay. Can we also use key informant interview in the ribbon method to have a deeper understanding of stakeholder preferences?
Definitely. You just need to make sure that the questions are open-ended so people can be able to express themselves, and then you would get the nuances and you get the detailed information on the why of the choices they're making.
Okay. And then engaging the wider community. This is from Racha. I did mention the previous questions were from, I think, Siri Bella and Emilia Mondo. This next question is from Racha Amati. Engaging the wider community in rural areas, especially for rural women, is harder. How can we effectively engage them if they don't have access to these resources?
So you have to be intentional. What I've realized over the years of working on gender and breeding is if you just ask that you need farmers, what happens is you get role model farmers. So farmers that have been there for a long time, and in most cases they're men, because also the extension officers are looking for who they have the least issue bringing on board. And often in the African community, or even like in India, is going to be the man is the head of the household, or the next is the mother-in-law. So you need to insist, I need 50%, for example, women, or 50% men, or 40% women and 60% women and men. And you need to explain to the extension officer why it's supposed to be that way. And if the extension officer can only get you the people by passing through the traditional chief, the chief also needs to understand why and the benefits of that in the community. So in the beginning, if you're intentional and you're clear who you need and why you need, then now they're going to bring that to you. But if you just tell them, I would love to have women, but you don't tell them why you should. So that way they don't see the value. So they go easily for the person that they can easily invite. And we know when it comes to culture, mobility for women. So it's often easy to invite men because they would always be available to come. So you need to be gender intentional and clear on why you want certain people in that activity.
All right. Last one, and then back to you, Eileen and Yila, to conclude. How do farmers explain market demand in a way that can be translated into specific traits breeders can develop varieties to address?
So two
Do you
things.
want me to read that again? Did you get that?
Yeah, no, I got that. So two things
Okay,
for beans especially, and then I might give Yila because it might be different for rice, and it's good to see these different crops, what happens there. For beans, farmers are just going to say market price. So when they're saying market price, they're telling you, we want the best price. And so literally that market price means that there should be a demand in the market. And that's how we started saying, oh, if farmers are saying market price, then that means we need to bring traders on board. We need to bring off-takers on board, because these farmers are selling to who? They're selling to traders, they're selling to off-takers, they're selling to consumers. So schools are important. Institutions, even local NGOs that actually pull these beans and give it to refugee camps or give it to school is important, because now we start linking. Farmers should then be able to grow what the off-taker is buying, because that's where the demand is, that's where they make the money. Should be able to buy what the consumers are asking for, should be able to buy what the processors are asking for. Because if a processor buys from them, it's a better market price compared to if they sell in the local market. Also, sometimes what farmers say is they would not just say the market, but they would say premium price. So literally they're telling you, we want a better price than what we have in the market. So if you get a processor that's interested in a particular variety that has certain traits and a farmer can grow it, a farmer gets a premium price because that processor buys directly from the farmer. It shows the quality and the quantity that they're going to get to meet their market. So that's why really everything is demand driven. But for that to happen, you need to make sure there's a conversation happening between these different partners. So everybody knows what each person wants and how to work together towards that common goal that they are all interested in, which at the end of the day is two things. For those who are doing commercial farming, it's profits, high productivity, better markets, profits. For those who are looking at more food security, they're looking at what the nutritional benefits are. And often with the changing now, in the diets and everything, nutrition is also becoming very key. And that's also sometimes where the premium price is for most of the farmers' goods. So Jumi, I don't know if you maybe want to add something there.
Yeah. And I just want to add that, yes, because like you said, depending on the crop, farmers do know, what translates into high market price or market demand based on the varieties. And because they do that in relation to the kind of variety, I will just give an example of cereal crops like sorghum and millet. Sometimes the definition or how we describe yield, it's not per ton of the acres that are being cultivated. We realized that when we did this, with sorghum farmers, a crop sorghum variety that produced high yield was rejected because once that variety was transformed into flour, then the flour yield was low. But the yield harvested per, acres of land produced was very high. So once that goes to market, the processors, the traders know it. And thankfully, it was not having the two varieties don't have the same color. So consumers or traders who were buying it from the farmers were very specific because they have tested it once they went home or they sold it to processors who transformed it into flour for different produce, either for home consumption, rejected it because once they pound it into flour, the yield was very low. So it doesn't give them the same amount of flour they get when they use the other variety. So that completely rejected that variety from market. So farmers always know this, and they are always able to relate with the traders and with the consumers, particularly those who process this product as consumers or sellers of the final product. So it's very important that all these, stakeholders are able to provide their input, and we are able to consider it in the design of the breeding pipeline as we do that. So this is just an example, and I would just say that it is very important because the farmers understand it. They are the one using it. They are the one engaging with the other, stakeholders in the segments.
Okay,
Right.
so thank you very much, Jumia. So we said we were going to send certificates to everyone. So please do send a message to Nathan so we get your email address. Please also help us fill out the survey feedback template that we've shared on the link. That would also, I think, be very helpful. So we see how we can improve this course. Special thanks, I think, goes particularly to the Gender Impact Platform, because they were the one who provided us with this opportunity to be able to share this knowledge with you from not just, the Alliance, but from ERI, from INERA as well, and other colleagues on the background that have contributed to this. I want to thank everyone for, the lovely comments, attentiveness, the questions at the end. Thanks to Nathan, for putting this together, sending out a link for you guys to register and, take us through this to make sure that there are no hitches. And we were able to do these course, I think, in time. Might be slightly over time. So I know Nathan mentioned that, but I think we're coming to the end where we're saying thank you very much. I'd pass it to Nathan because I don't know if there's any final things from his end, but from my end is just saying thank you to everyone. Thank you so much. And we are available, anytime you need anything extra, please reach out to us. We'll be able to provide that. Thanks.
And if there are questions that are not answered or not well answered, please send a mail. We'll be able to share our response.
All right. I think that's it. Nothing from my end, but thank you so much and goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.